Well, hello folks, and welcome to Retro Power Uncut episode 212. And you see me in a fairly noisy fabrication shop. Paint booth's running, Mark's busy in there. He'll elaborate in a bit on what he's been up to. But we're going to start with Aston Martin DBS. And things are moving along on the project. There's still quite a lot of planning going on in the background. That's what I'm going to be doing as soon as I finish doing this video. Just trying to work a few more steps in this project out, because we haven't got the full path all the way through the project determined yet. But we're cracking on with the tasks that we know need doing. To my left is the body tub, the steel part, which we've got to blast. At the moment we can't blast because we're running the paint booth, and we don't really like running our shop blast room at the same time as our paint booth, just in case we get any particles bypassing our extract on the blasting room, and then they start getting ingested by the air intake on the paint booth, which is right next to the blast room. It just loads up our intake filters, and we don't really want to load up the intake filters with stuff. There's not much comes out, it won't put much in the filters, but we'd just rather avoid that possibility, so we tend to try and run one or the other. So that's why we're not doing that at the moment. That'll probably be early part next week, I think, at a guess. But there's not really a big pressure to do that at the moment because of various other things. So that's sitting there awaiting blasting. But in the meantime, Matt is cracking on with getting to grips with the aluminium panels. We're trying to make the decisions on whether we replace or repair on the aluminium panels. Now, obviously, this is not going to be a budget project, a low budget project. So we don't want to cut any corners, but at the same time, it's easy to underestimate the level of work incurred when buying new panels. And if we buy new panels, they're inevitably going to need quite a lot of fettling and finessing before we can use them. So repairing these is, it's not quite the straightforward decision it might seem. Plus, the new panels are not going to be very cheap. So it's just juggling the options there. So Matt's set to on the near side front wing, the one that you can't really see in shot at the moment, and he's doing a pretty good job of getting all that straight. He's welded in 2 sections into the top of that where there was damage that wouldn't beat out. He's beaten out the accident damage that was down the side of that. He's still got the lower part to panel beat, but that's coming together pretty well. It does. The thing with aluminium, as distinct to steel, which I have to say I hadn't realised years ago. I was told about this by a guy called Trev Davis, who runs a company called Circuit Motor Bodies. I don't know if he'll be watching this, but hello Trev if he is. Absolutely brilliant bloke, incredible panel beater, incredible panel maker. Looks after some extremely high profile historic competition cars, and just a thoroughly lovely chap. But he showed me some work he'd done with a car many years ago that he couldn't publicise, where the aluminium body was incredibly damaged. It was sort of almost completely flattened in a severe accident. And then he showed me a picture sort of afterwards, and I said, oh right, so you made all those panels new? He said, no, I just beat it all out. How do you mean? Because if that was a steel body, it would have all stretched, and trying to shrink all that in the middle of panels would have been nearly impossible. He said, yeah, that's the difference. Aluminium doesn't really stretch like that. It tends to deform, and then you can beat it back, and it kind of just shrinks back onto itself. It doesn't really stretch like steel would, and that's the case here, is that we can actually beat a lot of damage out without stretching the panels. If it was steel, it'd be much harder work. But that's what Matt's doing. Panel beating that side. He's going to then move on to this side. The worst of the damage on this side is this arch lip, where this panel's been repaired in the past, and there's a weld line been put in where there wasn't originally a weld line, and it's put a horrible step into the arch. So the first stage of work on this is going to be trying to repair this wheel arch, trying to rechase this and sort this out. If we can repair the wheel arch and sort this out, then I think we've got a way forward with this wing. That's the biggest problem area on this wing. So we're going to start there. If that goes okay, there's holes in the top where it's been pulled, dents in the top that'll beat out. This weld line, some of this needs cutting out and redoing. There's a lot of panel beating to do, a lot of shape sorting out to do, but I think the rest will recover. The bottom edge of both wings is rotten, that needs repairing, so Matt's going to make new bottoms for both of them. If that bit works okay, this will panel beat, we'll make new bottoms for them. And the back edge, where it's been unclinched from the steel body tub, that will split if we try to reuse that. So we'll put a new over-length rear edge on the wing, TIG weld that on, and then when we go to refit the panels to the car, we'll leave that over length, and he can mark out where the door shut line needs to be, because we will need to put new door skins on the car. but he'll then be able to mark out where that door shut line needs to be, scribe it on, and then he can clinch that round in the right position and trim that to get the gaps exactly right. So that's the plan with that. The scuttle panel's good. The front panel's really quite bad. I can foresee us replacing that, but that's still a discussion because we don't know quite yet. I need to speak to the guy that makes the panels for these and just find out whether he has a book for those or whether he makes them to suit the car. If he makes them to suit the car, chances are we may as well repair this one. But if he has a book, that would be really good because we're not sure whether the symmetry on this one's right. We've got a bit of determination of whether the shape's actually correct this side. It's had some pretty severe damage. We're going to have to remake this section anyway. So if we have to remake that section anyway, we could do with knowing the exact shape of the front. So I'm going to find out if the guy that makes these has got the book for it. I assume he has. If he has, we'll probably just replace that panel with a new one and probably replace the balance with a new one as well. So that's what's going on there. Matt's getting into a bit of aluminium work, which is quite enjoying because I don't think he's done any aluminium work for a little while now. So that's a bit of a change of scenery for him. And that's basically where we're at on the Aston. I'm hoping by next week we'll be able to reveal a bit more in terms of the detail on what the running gear is going to be. But there are still balls in the air and being juggled on exactly what's happening there. We've had a couple of curveballs thrown at us by availability of things that we had assumed are available. Let's just put it that way. I'll enlighten more next week. Moving on, we come to Wasabi, where as you can see, I think the it's 07K, as one of our watchers reminded me, the code for the engine, the engine that I couldn't remember the description of last week. It's an 07K engine, and we actually had, I've forgotten his name now, but we actually had an email from a viewer who is also doing some work on 07K engines and has also made some really nice parts for an 07K engine to solve some of the problems. So that was very kind, and we may well be in touch. There's a couple of things there in that Dave Rowe has also made some parts, had some parts made as well for this, and some of the parts we're using are coming from Dave Rowe. So there's complications there, but that's much appreciated, thank you. And the parts you've done do look really good. But yeah, at the moment the engine's sat in position, drop down. We've had to remove, Bobby's removed the lower sump pan to enable the engine to drop closer to its final resting place, but still not quite there. We need to remove the next section of the sump really to be able to get it into its final place. But what we could do with really is a 3D print of the actual final dry sump pan so we can put that on the engine and then mock that up properly. So I need to talk to Dave Rowe, and that's on my to-do list. So that's where we're at on that. But then much more importantly, the body fit is proceeding. We've been through, last week, quite a lot of time was spent double checking and triple checking the CAD data and the scan data versus the reality of the body shell on the car. We got a couple of errors in the scan towards the back of the car that we've had to resolve, but we've got to the bottom of where those errors were, and they haven't affected anything we're doing in terms of the alignment, so that's good. Bobby's just refined the final bits of the alignment, and now he's unbolted, hence all the, if you look, there's various sort of strange bits of blobs of weld and things. They're just temporary alignment tabs which have been cut several times and tweaked and then welded back together. So those bits are all just temporary alignment blocks, and they've just been cut and re-welded a few times during the tweaking of all the alignment. But the alignment is now set, and those now will drop back into place and bolt in to give us a repeatable alignment point. So Bobby's now lifted the body shell back up so that he can do some work on the rear inner arches. And yesterday he was trimming up the flanges and tidying up the flanges and shrinking to remove excess metal, and generally reshaping and tidying up the Audi S4 inner rear arch tubs, so that he can then build the new inner quarter panels into the Saab body shell. As you can see, he's removed the Saab inner quarter panels, and he's come up with a plan for the design of the replacements for those inner quarters and how they're going to fit onto the inner arch tubs. So that's all Bobby's main drive of progress now, is to get the rear inner quarter panels fabricated, welded into the Saab shell, and then welded onto the Audi S4 inner arch tubs to anchor the back of the body shell together. We're going to work from the back forwards, mainly because there's a lot of fabrication to do in the A-pillar area, and we want to have the body shell all tied in place and fixed in place at the back before we have to remove the mountings from this area here. because there's not much strength in any of this bit here, and nearly all of that's going to need to be cut out. So we really want the body shell fully anchored in place before we start removing anything more from the front, which we'll need to do to be able to do the fabrication. So that's the reason for the particular sequence we're doing. But yeah, that's all progressing really well. Should be into this for a while now. It's forging ahead with getting the actual metalwork together. And the big picture is that once that bit is mated to that bit and all of the fabrication work, making all of the intersecting panels, basically the bits that join the two together, once all those panels are done and fabricated and in place, and those two are joined, then George will be back on with doing some more scan work to get everything scanned to work out the final edges, all the edge flanges on that body shell that he's got to make the body panel tooling to line up with, so that when we mould all the panels, they've got the correct edges to line up with. So that's what's going on there. And we'll move on from that now, I think, and go over to the E-type. Tom is busy over here. That's an Integra exhaust manifold. I'll just move that out of the way. Tom is continuing with the rear arch tubs, and I don't think last week, did we show a finished arch tub last week? I don't know if we did. I think it was in the car, but yeah, I think it was partially finished. Tom's finished the offside rear arch tub now for the V12 E-type, and now he's working on the near side arch tub, and this is actually at quite a good point. I'm not going to put sweaty finger marks all over that. This is at quite a good point to show. So you can see his little template for the intermediate section of this arch. So as I say, recapping slightly, he's welded an extension piece onto the original inner arch sort of horizontal section. So that's now I'd say smooth. It's not completely smooth. It's not one arc. It's not one radius. But it's basically probably a 3 radius arch section going around the inside of the arch, projecting horizontally underneath the car, and then this section will intersect that with a stepped joint. So where this goes over the other section, there'll be a joggle joint, and the two will go over, and then that'll be plug welded together. This obviously being the wheel arch lip that will spot weld to the arch lip on the external bodywork, and then this being the wheel clearance area, so the wheel comes up in here, clears here. So you can then see how that's been made. This is a section that's basically hammer shaped and wheeled. This is jennied and folded on the arch lip there. This edge is shrunk over, some wheeling there to get the final compound shape. This edge is shrunk over and then planished in the wheel, and then the edge of this is knocked over to get a bit of a radius onto that. That's shrunk over slightly, just using a hammer and tapping it over a stake and then tightening it up afterwards. And then the two are trimmed together to get that weld line, and then Tom's just finished TIG welding that. He's now at the stage where he's had to stop for a minute to let me do this video, because he's now at the planishing stage, which I look at the end, he's already planishing. Yeah, he's already working on this end. So you can see where he's just ground the beginnings of that weld back, so there's not too much weld there to planish, and then he's now hammering all that weld out to smooth it out and stretch it back. Where that weld is, that will have shrunk. So you can see it's a pretty parallel weld line, but it will have shrunk a bit, so he's now stretching all that back to get the correct curvature on that. Again, it's an inner arch, so it's not super critical, but he does want to get it right. You can see there now that's a nice smooth arch, whereas there you can see that's sunk down a bit from the weld there, where that's been raised back up by planishing there. So nice job. He's cracking on there, doing great work. So yeah, he's not too far off having the two really tricky bits of the arch tubs done. Once they're done, then there's a little finishing piece at the bottom, like an awkward little corner piece to stop the dirt piling up basically in the back of the arch. So he's going to get that done. And then I've forgotten what else he needs to do. Other than the joggle and getting those welded in and spot welded, that's pretty much about there with the arch tubs. And then the next phase of this car will be on to the boot reinforcement, the boot floor reinforcement, the spare wheel carrier and the battery carrier and the bits to stop the boot floor flexing. And that's pretty much where we're at with the metalwork on that. I'll let Cal elaborate on the other work going on that, because that's more in the CAD area. Moving on from that, we're going to have a look at XJC. Have a brief gulp of tea on my way. Stu is working on what we touched on last week, but continuing on this more of the same basically, which is all the detail work around the reinforcement and rebuild of the bulkhead to clear the Vintage Air HVAC unit. So I'm not going to go into too much on the HVAC because you've heard enough of that. He's folded up a really nice section, which is like a profiled box, if you like. I think he's got a little little sketch somewhere over here working out the angles. It's that sort of shape in reality. It's that sort of shape. That was working out his angles. It's like a tapered, slightly pointy with a triangle on the end box, which basically joins into the bottom, the underside of the dash, the top of the footwell, and the bulkhead, and clears the heater and gives us a mounting for the heater. And that's what this section across here is. That's folded in 2mm thick steel, and then it carries on across the top of the transmission tunnel, tied into the bulkhead. So it adds the strength back to that area that we've lost, where we've removed the bottom corner of the bulkhead there. This section went along and then up, and this corner carried on. And obviously that corner is a point of strength going across the bulkhead, which we've removed. And whilst we're still putting metal back there, it's not the shape that's going to actually give us that transverse strength. So that folded box section of 2mm steel then gives us the transverse strength that we've lost by cutting that corner out. That's welded into the A-post, and then it's welded all the way across the top of the transmission tunnel and ties in to the corner by the pedal box that side, just to give us that transverse strength back. So yeah, that's all coming together really well. Stu's just getting through. It's quite awkward, fiddly fabrication work, making all the sections up for this. Bearing in mind, it would be easy if you weren't trying to traverse it all around a heater unit, and also get the pipes in and out of the heater unit, create access for the pipes, be able to fit them and unfit them, and all of the other delights that go with being able to fit one of those units. So I'm not going to elaborate further really. You'll see that develop. That's where we're at on XJC. I think at that point, I'm going to hand over to Mark. Let him take you through the body shop, because there's lots going on. I can see him beavering away in there now, spraying polyester. So I'm going to let him take you through what he's up to.
All right, we're back again. Jensen was back in the booth for the doors, bonnet, and boot lid. We had to get some polyester in a different make because we're still waiting for the other one. It's at customs, but it happens. Could have been faster ways, but yeah, we've put some Max Mayer on this there, polyester. It's quite good stuff, to be fair. I'm quite happy with it, but it's not a cheap way of doing a whole car because this stuff's expensive this way. So yeah, we're blocking this now. I blocked it 80 grit, 120. Re-guide coat through the stages. I'm just doing 180 just to check how good the bonnet is now. Steve's done the boot lid there. With that was just straight out of metalwork. We thought we'd smash some on it, see how it goes, because that moves a lot. When you put the glass in, it flexes right out. So Gaz is blocking the doors on it. Then when the stuff comes in eventually, we'll smash a lot all over it again, probably about 4 coats. Block that, hopefully it's laser straight, get it into primer, block that, and then we're soldiering ahead. Also, Gaz has been on with the Cozzy, look, in the background, bit of Moonstone. They're fresh out the booth 2 days ago. Jamie didn't get footage, I don't think, because he's useless. Nah, I'm only joking, he's good, you all know he's good, So yeah, shells in there now. Masked up, we could have a look. Do you want to have a look? Shall we have a look, Jamie? Come on then, follow me. Come on, follow me. All right, that was rubbish, sorry. All right, lights on, nobody's home. All right. So yeah, she's masked up, ready to go. We've got another dilemma. Gaz's lacquer gun. Needle's worn. You noticed it just on one of the panels near the end. So we're waiting until maybe Tuesday for that part to come. Just never ending waiting for stuff. I was going to do it, but you can't have 2 painters doing the same car, because if I do it better, it's going to show him up, and I don't want that. No, he's a good painter, So yeah, hopefully next week's episode, painted. I can't promise anything. Could be an earthquake, could be a hurricane come. So that's it. Also, let's come back again. Through it. We're on set, guys. Also, all this stuff, Jamie, come over here. We've been prepping endless panels for this, the Jensen. It's all like infill panels, like dash parts, engine bay parts. You've got like a servo cover here. So all these have been fabricated by Stu, the wizard. So yeah, like, these are all going to go matte black. So when we get booth time, I've got to go in here. Also, rocker cover for one of the Honda engines, that's going matte black. The other one went red. Shit shields. This is for the Camaro, that's going matte black. All matte black. It's going to be a beautiful task, not? So yeah, that's it. So I'll see you next time.
Well, thank you, Mark. And I'm going to hand straight over to Cal and let him take you through assembly shop and what's going on in the CAD layer, and then also have a look around at the den, where there's something interesting, an interesting toy of my own has arrived back. So I'll let Cal show you through that lot, and then I think we're going to do another little video as a little update on my own project, probably next week, I should think. So that'll be quite cool. See you next week.
Thank you very much, Nat. Jamie, I was about to launch into talking about this, and Jamie just said, why not talk a little bit about SEMA? So you will have noticed I was absent last week, and that is because myself and George, along with our respective partners, went to the SEMA show in Las Vegas. Now, I've been once before, George's first time. I went in 2019. And I think it's quite good that it had been 5 years between my visits, because it meant that there was a big turnaround of stuff. I didn't really see anything I'd seen before. And it was awesome. We had just the best time. Anybody who's not been, you need to put it on your bucket list of things if you're into cars. You also need to assign a fair amount of time, because it's absolutely enormous. Now, for our UK viewers, just to put it in perspective, the biggest, or certainly one of the biggest car shows in the UK is the Classic Motor Show at the National Exhibition Centre in Birmingham. Now, I believe the approximate total square footage is about 1 million square foot of that entire show, which is several halls of the National Exhibition Centre. Now, at SEMA, they've recently added the West Hall, and that one hall alone is 1 million square foot, and I think the total show, including the outside areas, is somewhere around 7 million. So it's massive, and it's very difficult to take everything in. So, I mean, we went 3 days, and we still didn't even go into 2 of the halls, but we had an absolutely amazing time, and the standard is fantastic there. There's a few people I know over there, so it was good to meet them. There are some people doing some incredible work at the minute. So the winner of the Battle of the Builders was this green 69 Charger by Classic Car Studio, which is a car I've been watching the build of for a while. Cal Also Creations as well are absolutely on top of their game. Obviously Roadster Shop, as always. It was nice to meet those guys. They invited us to the Best on RS party, which was pretty much just a massive piss up in a nightclub, with basically all of the famous hot rod builders there, so that was really cool. And another standout car actually for us, we saw it straight away, so I didn't want to get too excited, was the white Datsun, I think it's Datsun Fairlady Roadster, with, I'm going to get this wrong now, but I think it was a SR20 on twin Webers, rocker arm suspension, kind of coilovers on the rear, sort of rear seat area. Just a super cool build. It wasn't kind of on the same level in terms of absolute perfection of paintwork and fits and finishes as some of the kind of big name hot rod builders, but this is a car that had basically been built by a youngish guy by himself, and it just had all the right ingredients. It's just a really cool thing, you know. It just sometimes, I guess people talk about the X factor, don't they? And it's that intangible thing that you can't quite put your finger on why, but although it wasn't perfection of execution, the whole package was just super cool. So that was a good car, you know, that was a standout car. And then of course you expect the guys like the Ring Brothers to have done some amazing things. So that pink Barracuda, I think it was called Infected, was absolutely incredible. But it's one thing we were discussing between us, me and George, is that the problem is the standard is now so high that kind of formula of American muscle car, where almost everything's subtly changed, everything's super smoothed in, the fit and finish is perfect, the engine bay is perfect, it almost feels kind of a bit done, too much done now, and you want to see some slightly unusual cars outside your normal Camaros, Chargers, Barracudas, Mustangs. So that was probably the thing. If I was going to say there was one thing it would be nice to see more of, it would be less common cars, less American muscle cars, and that type of build done on a wider range of cars, because there tends to be a certain way of doing kind of Euro type cars, and often the two don't cross over. But I'd love to see that kind of Ring Brothers, Roadster Shop, Cal Auto Creation style of build, but on some less obvious American cars. Anyway, I won't dwell too long on SEMA, but if you ever get the opportunity to go, please do. And also, likewise, I've said this before, but Le Mans Classic is just absolutely the most amazing event as well. So two must-see events for car guys. Anyway, moving on. Allegro. I almost did like a gnat. I shouldn't like observe mannerisms, because I have plenty of weird ones as well. It always amuses me. Nat kind of walks around like this and then goes like sort of whipping the car he's about to talk about. So I'm going to do that. So Allegro. Anthony, I think it was on with installing the gear shift. We're actually kind of chipping away really fast. I noticed the other day an Instagram post that Nat had posted when these two shells were, I think, in primer, ready to be starting prep for paint, and it was June. I think it was June the 20th, which is, counting on my fingers, 5 months ago. So we've gone from not even starting prep for paint to both cars pretty close to being built in 5 months, which I'm quite proud of. But anyway, because we've got a lot of things already ready, things are going together pretty quick. So Anthony got the gear shift mechanism all in, which James refurbished a few months back. So the shifter is literally connected and operational now. You'll also notice this quite cool punched and swaged slam panel here, which is the piece that goes in and attaches the radiator and aircon condenser. This was all kind of mocked up, and Bobby did all the fabrication when it was at the metalwork stage. So essentially you drop the radiator in, you drop the condenser in, and they have little pins on the top of their housings that engage with these rubber grommets in this, and then we've kind of sized the holes and the grommets, so at a glance, if you squint, it's just a row of holes. These end holes here and here and here and here have smaller little holes underneath them, so that these grommets fit correctly, but the OD of the grommet matches the shape of these holes, so it just looks at a glance like a row of equal sized holes. Hope that makes sense. So yeah, that's all going in. You can see the fans sitting there in the front. The whole thing's just looking cool. Now the engine's in, it's sitting a bit lower now, and you're getting a little bit more of a suggestion of how it will eventually look. And I'm just so happy with how they're turning out. We're still missing the side skirts, which we've got to make, which kind of deepen the side, but we're going to do those black, so they deepen the side, i.e. bring it closer to the floor, make it look lower, but by doing them black, it doesn't kind of make the side of the car look fatter. It keeps the slimness and the proportions right. I think we need to drop it a little bit at the back, raise it a little bit at the front. But yes, all going well. And then other things have been going on, air conditioning. So we're using the standard Integra DC2 aircon compressor. We just had the used ones. I think one of them came with a donor engine. The other car, it had been stripped out, so we had to source one. Just used ones, and then we've rebuilt them in-house, so George has been doing that, stripped them all apart, bead blast all the external casing, reseal kit, a rebuild kit. They're actually reasonably straightforward to do. You shouldn't be it kind of seems daunting, an aircon compressor, for some reason, or it does to me. But don't be daunted, it's something you could rebuild yourself. If you just buy the rebuild kit, it's essentially stripping everything apart, making sure all the bores are clean and not corroded, putting everything back together, making sure you get some PAG oil in there, making sure all the seals are nicely seated, and doing a nice job of cleaning up the outside of the casing. Everything looked good in these, really. They're quite an interesting, if you've never seen one before, it's almost like there's probably a word for this, but it's kind of like a rotary cam, like an offset disc that then pushes a series of longitudinal pistons as it spins. It kind of pushes each one in advance, and then they return again, and it's those pistons moving in the bores that compress the refrigerant. So yeah, aircon compressor on this one. We are also getting the exhaust system. I think I mentioned last week we'd got the manifold mocked up. We've got the midsection of the system in, which is basically a standard, I think it's a spoon DC2 midsection that we've used, because there's no point us making one when there's one sort of available off the shelf. And then the differences are the back section, because the Allegro is shorter than the Integra, we're going to make our own back box. I think we've just actually received the silencers from Adam at Fabco, ironically, because he's the guy who's probably most associated with building Johnny Smith's Allegro, which also has a Honda engine in it. engine in it, albeit a K series, not a B series. So we've got the silencers from him. We're doing a short, fairly big diameter back box, and then where the cat would be at the front of this, we're going to put another small box in there, because none of the boxes are particularly big, so we're putting 3 boxes in it, just because I'm pretty sure it's still going to be fairly noisy. So that's looking good. Other things we've gone on with, strut brace. We're using the standard DC2 strut braces. The centre section is originally just, I think it's lacquered silver aluminium, raw finish aluminium that's been lacquered. We've basically stripped it, Scotch-brighted it to get a nice even grain on it and get any scratches out of it, and then they're just going to be clear anodised, so it'll have a silver strut brace. And then on the subject of the strut brace, we were just trial fitting the throttle bodies to get the injector size sorted, because we knew when we did the mock-up, the fuel rail sits very close to the strut brace. So we need to run not full length injectors. There are kind of 3 generic injector sizes, and we need to run either the middle length or the really short Pico type injectors. And I think we're going to go with the mid length ones, and it just brings the fuel rail a bit tighter in towards the throttle bodies, gives us a little bit more room. And then the other thing throttle body related we're just starting on is the vacuum arrangement, and we're basically building a little vacuum reservoir. It's going to have takeoffs off each of the intake runners. They're all going to be teed together into a little reservoir, which is going to have a flange-mounted map sensor and a flange-mounted idle air control valve on it, and then also a feed out to the brake servo for the vacuum feed to the servo. So we were just planning out, but that's one of the things we'd never actually designed or fabricated at the metalwork stage, because we knew there was a reasonable amount of room back there, so it's going to mount, I think, on top of that rear engine mount. So we're just in the design phase for that. But that's all looking good. And if I move on to interior, and I'm going to prime you already that Richard, unfortunately, has had to go home sick this week. So, or today at least. So he's not going to be able to record his segment. Now what I'm going to do is actually leave that. So we won't do a den visit today. We'll leave it so Richard, because I know he's done quite a lot, but I've not been, because I've been away at SEMA, I've not been totally on top of it, and I don't really feel qualified to speak for him. So I'm going to let him talk about what he's done next week. But what I will mention is the bits he's been doing here. So the headlining, I think we saw him fitting the headlining in that car last week. Today he's been doing the one in this car. He's also been doing the C-pillar panels. Now, stupidly, we thought, that panel's actually completely standard. We can use the original Allegro C-pillar trims. They were in remarkably good condition, and we'll simply fit those. However, when although we had upholstered them in the vinyl that the headlining is, we went to fit them, and they don't fit very well. Now, I suppose we shouldn't be surprised by that. We were kind of expecting original 1970s British Leyland trim to be an attractive quality of fit, and funnily enough, it turns out it's not. So we decided to remake those, because we just weren't really happy with how they looked. So Richard's been cutting those out of some, I think it's fairly thick plastic material. He'll have to fill you in on exactly what it was next week. And then there's a little strip that just sits at the back of the parcel shelf panel as well. So he's just cutting the strips for those. They'll all be in the same white vinyl that the headlining is. And then he's been trial fitting, because we need to check the fit of all of those against the parcel shelf. He's been trial fitting the parcel shelf, and he's been using the one for the orange car, trial fitting that. And it just looks so good. I've seen the pieces together before, but not actually in the car. And it's kind of that little hint of how the interior is going to look now. And I'm so excited to see it all come together. Heater's just gone off, and I do this every time. I think as the heater goes off, I stop talking over it, even though I didn't need to, because the microphone's next to me. So suddenly I go from blasting out really loud to talking much more quietly, and I bet it's really annoying for people watching the video. Anyway, so Richard's been on with the back shelf. So that we made a while ago. It's basically a die bond baseboard, which was actually CAD designed from a scan and then CNC routed on our router, and then the three-dimensional bit that kind of bulks that up around the speaker grills is also CNC machined on our router in like a high-density urethane foam. That was laminated onto a really, really thin backing board of something rigid, a rigid plastic. I can't remember exactly what it was now, just so that we could stretch the leather round without it kind of crimping the edges in on the thin edges. And then there are some die bond inserts, so the front insert that's also in the same dark navy leather as the rest is CNC'd in die bond. And then the tartan centre section again was CNC'd in die bond on our router, wrapped in that, I think it's a Porsche plaid material. And then we've got the 2 billet speaker grills. And before anybody says, oh, those bright silver grills are going to reflect in the back window, we are just trial fitting them for the minute. They are going to be anodised a dark colour. I think most of the interior aluminium parts on these are going to be anodised a sort of gunmetal grey, actually very similar to the grey we've done on the interior to this. So those grills are just bright silver at the moment. I'm trying to resist the temptation to speak up again over the noise of the heater. So yeah, we're kind of at like ultra exciting stage where I can start to visualise all the interiors going together on them. Another area of progress on them is the heater units. So Anthony's been rebuilding the Honda heat and aircon units, HVAC units as we'll call them, heating, ventilation and air conditioning. Because it's Honda Integra bulkhead floor pan, we intentionally made it so we could retain the original HVAC unit. Now all we've done is basically go through it, make sure everything functions fine. We've pressure tested the heater matrix, pressure tested the aircon evaporator. Where there are some foam gaskets and things that were getting a bit brittle, we've pulled them apart, made new ones. And the other thing we've done on the aircon evaporator is change the temp sensor in there, because we want to do the air conditioning control via our ECU master PDM. So we wanted a temperature control, a temperature sensor, should I say, that we have a known scale for, basically a voltage to temperature scale, so that we can put that into the ECU master ECU, and when we connect the temp sensor to the ECU or PDM, we can know from that scale what the temperature of the aircon evaporator is, and we will use that information to kick the compressor in and out, controlling it via the PDM. So yeah, they're ready to go in, and Alex is just about getting there with the in-car part of the engine harness. So that's the bit that goes from the ECU to the bulkhead connector that's going to go out to the engine harness. Also has the branch that goes to the PDM. It's got a branch that interfaces with the main dash and chassis harness. And I think that's the bit he's going to be on with next, is the main harness that goes behind the dash and to the PDMs, and that will have bulkhead connectors for the front legs of the loom and an inline connector for the rear leg of the loom, which will be the next bits. But if we get the bits behind the dash done, that means we can get the HVAC unit in for the final time, we can get the dash all in, which is in manufacturing progress at the minute, and we can get the steering column and just start cracking on with all that part of the build. My brain was then just firing onto billet parts. I was thinking, have we got the machine centre console section? And I can't remember if we have or not. However, we have received quite a lot of other billet parts. So the bonnet hinge parts, I think we might have briefly shown them the other week, but now they're back from anodising, so they're in the process of being assembled with their bushes and shoulder bolts that attach them all together. I noticed George had very nicely done, or I don't know if it's George or Luke actually, who'd done a nice little printout of assembly drawing, but with a misspelt hinges. D in hinges came from somewhere. So yeah, they're being assembled, ready to go in. And then in terms of other billet stuff, I think most of it related to Camaro. So I noticed the other day, I don't know if it was on YouTube or Instagram, I got corrected on saying Camaro by somebody saying I should say it Camaro, which I thought was quite ironic, considering I always used to say Camaro. And then after getting constantly hounded that was the wrong way of saying it, I now started saying Camaro. So I'm going to stick with Camaro. We got the billet console section, so the main part with the gauges and the gear shifter surround, and then the back part that's got a cordless charger. They've come back from anodising, so we can finish off the console now, and also all of the door strips. I don't think we might have shown them actually the other week. The strips that kind of would be chrome strips on the original door cards, they're all machine strips, so there's a lower one and upper one, same for the rear cards, and then a little badge that says Stravage, which is the project name. And they're the bits we were waiting for to complete the door cards. So Richard, as soon as he's back, should be now in a position to finish those door cards. And then we'll be able to get everything else in place, including, I know this is a nice nod to earlier when I was mentioning the Ring Brothers, we have got some Ring Brothers billet parts for that. We decided that their window winders, door release handles, lock pins, etc. were a really nice billet option already. Didn't really see the point in us designing our own. They kind of were in keeping with the look we wanted, so they're ready to go on. There was a slight epiphany, shall we say, just before I went away to SEMA on part of the interior design for that. I'd been kind of mulling over in my head. We'd painted the central section of the dash silver, the bit that goes around the central two vents and the vintage air heater controls. And the intention was that there were going to be silver inserts on the console. But of course, they're machined aluminium parts, and we kind of had it in our head we were going to paint those silver to match the front part, but it seemed absolute sacrilege to paint those bits silver, given that they looked so amazing in their machined finish. And I'd been trying to rack my brains over the best route to go with that. And eventually I had this idea, messaged the guy we're building the car for, and he messaged me back saying I was literally thinking exactly the same thing. So we've now gone with repainting that central piece of the dash black, so the whole dash will be satin black. You'll still have the silver bezels on those Audi vents we've used in there, sort of breaking up the black on the dash. But then that means we can do the centre console inlays in a clear anodized finish, so they will be essentially their bare machined finish, and the same on the door strips. So you've got that kind of obviously billet parts, not painted, but then it all ties in with everything else. So all's well that ends well on that. It's one of those cars where the vision has kind of changed a little bit over the years, because it's been a little bit of a roller coaster of a project. But yeah, again, it's at the stage where I can't wait to see all the last bits go together, which I reckon the interior should be going in next week. Kuma, we are just putting this on the ramp to, actually we put it on the ramp to do the exhaust. I'm now wondering what we are doing on this at the minute. Now I feel woefully ill-prepared from what we're doing on it. I can't remember. I know one of the things we've done is just taken the throttle bodies off to do the fitment of the fly-by-wire motor, or an adjustment to the fitment of it, because we noticed on Project 1 we were having some idle control. It's fly-by-wire, and we're having some idle control problems where it would kind of fluctuate a little bit. And we're kind of chasing it down to being excessive play in the linkage. But also another thing was the way we had the link rod set was such that it was basically straight when it was full throttle, but when it was at idle it was slightly cranked over. So you're losing a little bit of the motion ratio when it was at almost closed throttle or fully closed throttle. So we're kind of altering the position of that slightly, and also changing the linkage to try and lose some of the play out of it. Because obviously now we've done a lot of the development work for this car on Project 1, we can just kind of duplicate that over onto this car. So that's what we're on with that. Churchill, a few angles of attack. Actually, Richard's been on with this with a view to allowing Luke to carry on with this interior design. So Richard has been making the door cards. They are just being hand cut on this one from die bond. And the reason we're making them now is that although Luke has progressed the interior design a fair amount, he wants to actually start modelling the final parts with a view to getting them 3D printed or machined. And there is the inner door has quite a twist to it. It does originally, and because our doors are longer than normal, it's more exaggerated than normal. And because he wants the back face of his machined parts, the bits that actually mate up against the door card, to be a perfect fit to the card, he wanted to actually have a card in place first and then scan that to get the exact three-dimensional shape of it, so then he can essentially cut the rear face of all his components by that shape. So Richard's been hand making the door cards for this. They're done now, so we can get those in. Luke can carry on with the next step, and that's actually also the reason the door frame is in place. So there's a section basically that sits along here, a little channel that holds the scraper seal that sits on the inside of the glass, but it also has the kind of upward flange that the top of our door card will hook over. So again, we wanted to get that frame in, that channel in, so that it's got all of the detail of where the door card, top section of the door card mates up with, so that you can get all the detail right on that, make sure the quarter lights open and don't clash with the top of that piece. So that's why all that's in there. Same reason this rear little hinge arrangement, which is the standard Mark II Jag opening quarter light hinge, we're repurposing that to actually open the whole of the quarter light on this, rather than just the rear section as it would on the normal four-door car. And then George Sinclair has just been doing the steering down link, so he fabricated that the other week. All the parts have been away to be plated, Xylan coated, etc. So it's just doing the final assembly of that, ready to go in. So yeah, I think mainly the progress we're kind of looking forward to on this at the minute is interior, because as soon as Luke's got those door card pieces final design, we can start 3D printing and machining those. We're also going to start making the centre console rear section, getting that in place, so then Richard can start doing the hand sculpture of the rear seat area, which is the next thing on the cars with that, really. And I think, amazingly, before I started talking on camera, I was saying to Jamie, I don't think I've got much to talk about. It's going to be a ridiculously short video, and I've somehow managed to waffle on for absolutely ages. I've talked about this. I think I've covered everything on that interior-wise. I need to just hand over, I think, on that note, to the CAD den, and those guys can show you what they've been up to.
Okay, hello, welcome back to the CAD Cave. So this week it's been a bit bitsy because Luke has been out learning to save lives, and so if anyone like loses an arm or has any form of quite dramatic injury, Luke's got us covered now. But yeah, while Luke's been doing that, I've been working on E-Type. So this week it's been continuing on from what I was doing a couple of weeks ago. Obviously I was off last week at SEMA with Cal, which was awesome. Got a load of inspiration and saw some amazing builds. But yeah, back to these. So it's been working on intake. We've had a couple of developments. So originally with the Jag V12, we was going to be going all individual throttle bodies. After a few concerned people, namely Alex, when it comes to tuning and getting everything balanced, he was quite concerned about getting the refinedness level high enough with the V12 and its engine side and drivability and all that kind of stuff. So now it's looking like we're going to go for twin 84mm throttle bodies, which are Bosch units. So what I've been doing is converting the manifold over to work with that. So it's still going to be using these style runners from Genv, but then we're going to convert it to, instead of the throttle bodies being here, these will just be a spacer unit with the injectors built into it. And then the manifold, which I will upload some B-roll for Jamie so he can like tie that in. That will then go to, like I said, two 84mm throttle bodies, one on each side. Obviously this is just still work in progress and we're just trying to figure everything out. So I've just fleshed out the shape of this now, just making sure it fits under the bonnet and all that kind of stuff, which it kind of does. It's quite close, so I need to do a little bit more tweaks. And then it's figuring out where to put all the filters and all this kind of stuff, because there was some more concerns about doing them in the front, which you was going to do if you was paying attention in previous episodes. And then yeah, it's going to be moving a little bit further forward with this, and then in turn that allows me to do more on the inner bonnet stuff, getting that kind of design a bit more fleshed out. With all of it, we're kind of about there. It's just going to be a load of like little fine details, getting all the mounting like hardware figured out, how everything's going to be made, because this is probably going to be carbon. So a little bit of a brief thing, what we're thinking currently is the main body is going to be carbon, and then the flanges which mount it to the throttle bodies will be made from billet, with then the trumpets built into those. And then that means when it's being made from the carbon, we can lay it up from the inside, and then this end flange here can be added in after with billet, bonded in, and just makes the whole process a lot easier. So yeah, that's what I've been on. I will now pass to Luke, where he will no doubt tell you some more interesting things about what he's been up to so far.
Hi guys, Nat here. I'm joking, it's Luke. Sat next to Nat's desk because I'm currently scan cleaning for Churchill. Over the course of last week and the last 3 days whilst I've been off, as George said, I was at a first aid course. Actually super interesting. I thought it was going to be a bit dull and mundane, but super fun group, really good people teaching it, and I learned so much. And people here are now slightly marginally safer, so that's a good thing. But no, anyway, first day back at work. I have scanned Churchill this morning, and I've just been figuring out a few bits on the Allegro hinges because they've arrived. But yeah, Richard very kindly made the actual final door cards for Churchill. That allowed me to put that in, along with the dash, the window frames, the rear window opener, basically everything that sits around the door card and kind of needs to be designed around for all the final parts. And then what I can do is I can basically design front to back, because these door cards are basically front to back, one long sweep like the car is basically. Get that all in, get the shapes in, get it all trimmed around everything that needs to be, and start actually making final parts which can be attached to the door card and then the door itself. What this also allows me to do is sort out the dash end caps. The dash end caps for the dash top and bottom that Stu made out, fabricated himself. They are just flat pieces with the flat dash bordering that top and bottom, and so they need some sort of 3D printed end cap which kind of clamps that all together, fits in really nicely with the door, and then yeah, comes together really nicely, fingers crossed.
Okay, thank you very much, guys. As I said, Richard being away, I'm not going to bother nipping down to the den this week, but next week we'll go down there and there'll be a bumper crop of things to catch up on. In the meantime, if you want to go on the den's website, thedenautomotive.co.uk, find out a little bit about what we're doing down there, and get in touch if you want us to look after your car down there. And of course, if you want us to do a big project, then get in touch about that. See you next week.